Before beginning, follow the first steps below this video. Insert the service wedge between the rear housing and the stand. Use the display removal tool to cut through the VHB adhesive along the sides and top of the display panel. Avoid the top center edge of the display where the delicate microphone flex cables and camera are located. Allow a 3-inch or 7.6 centimeter protective zone here. Hold the tool perpendicular to the computer edge and roll it back and forth until the wheel moves easily. Change the wheel as it gets sticky or bent. As the display panel starts to loosen, use the flat end of a black stick between the display and the rear housing. Do not force the black stick. Doing so could fracture the display panel. Be especially careful around the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas. Do not pry these areas with the black stick. With the display adhesive loosened, use your fingers and a black stick to tilt the display away from the housing. Tilt the display open slightly, just enough to reach the cables that connect to the logic board. Disconnect the 3 flex cables from the logic board, the backlight cable, the EDP cable with the long metal bar, and the camera cable with the short metal bar. Carefully lower the display panel. Remember that it is still attached with the adhesive at the bottom. Locate the tabs for the 2 bottom VHB strips. Peel the strips from the outer edge to the center. Then use the display removal tool to loosen any remaining adhesive at the chin. Gently remove the display panel from the housing and place it in an ESD-safe bag. Refer to the service guide to remove the remaining VHB strips and clean the rear housing. To replace the display, make sure that the new VHB strips are attached as described in the service guide. Place the display panel on the chin. Check that it is centered and seated. Use the display removal tool to help align the sides and top of the display panel. Apply a long strip of painter's tape to the bottom of the display. Stand back to check the alignment from a distance. If you can see the rear housing, realign the display. Apply 2 vertical strips of tape to the bottom of the display. Tilt the display forward and support it with one hand. Use your other hand to pull the clear release liners from the 2 VHB strips at the bottom. Tilt the display up, leaving enough room to connect the cables. Connect the backlight, EDP, and camera cables. Keeping the cables slack, pull the remaining VHB liners from the top and sides of the rear housing. With all the VHB release liners removed, lower the display panel against the rear housing. Starting at the bottom of the display, use the silicone display roller to adhere the VHB strips to the glass. Use the roller in one vertical direction, from the bottom to the top. Do not roll down. Then roll the roller horizontally, back and forth across the display width. Check the corners and edges of the panel for equal adherence. Remove the painter's tape. Clean the front of the display with a clean, damp, lint-free cloth. Remove the service wedge. Follow the last steps below to complete this repair. Follow the first steps below this video. Lift the Mylar tab on the right fan cable where it attaches to the logic board. Open the locking lever. Pulling the tab can tear it. Instead, slide the pointed end of a black stick under the flex cable to disconnect the right fan cable. Repeat these steps for the left fan cable. Starting with the lower screws, loosen but do not remove the 4 identical T10 screws from the fan module. Tilt the fan out of the housing with the 4 screws captive in the rubber gaskets. The 2 lower screws attach to long standoffs that screw into the housing. If the long standoffs come off with the fan, use pliers and a T10 screwdriver to remove them from the fan. Then use a T25 screwdriver to reinstall the standoffs on the housing. To reinstall the dual fan assembly, seat it in the housing so that the fan gasket seals completely with the heatsink gasket. Adjust the fan as needed for a tight seal. Use slight downward pressure to align the screws. Starting at the top, install the 4 T10 screws. Connect the left and right flex cables and close the locking levers. Press the tabs over the fan connectors. Follow the last steps below to complete this repair. Steps below to begin at this point. Disconnect the rear microphone flex cable located at the top right edge of the logic board. Insert the wireless card support tool behind the corner of the logic board. Remove the 2 T4 screws from the metal bracket. Remove the metal bracket. Use the antenna tool to disconnect the 4 antenna cables from the logic board. Remove the wireless card support tool. At the bottom right corner of the logic board, remove the top T8 screw and the bottom T4 screw from the metal cowling. Remove the metal cowling. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the audio jack platform connector. At the lower left corner of the logic board, raise the lever on the power button cable connector. Use a black stick to carefully release the cable adhesive from the logic board. Disconnect the power button cable. To protect the delicate power button cable, use a small piece of tape to secure it to the chin. Disconnect the power supply signal cable. Use a Torx driver to remove the 4 silver T8 bus bar screws from the left side of the logic board. Discard them. Although some of the black logic board screws appear identical, the color of the coat of nylock on the screw threads varies. Keep track of the logic board screw locations for reinstallation. Remove the 4 T8 screws from the bottom and sides of the logic board. Remove the 2 long T8 screws from the top standoffs near the heatsink. Place the single stiffener on the pins of the logic board service tray. Handle the logic board by the edges and remove it from the housing. Never handle it by the heatsink. Place the logic board on the service tray by aligning the notch on the board with the raised block on the tray. Set an adjustable torque driver to 0.3 Newton meter. Attach the Phillips number 2 bit. Then use the torque driver to secure the board to the stiffener. Install the 3 screws with the 2 longest screws closest to the heatsink. Slide the dual stiffener onto the board. Hold the dual stiffener to the block, then secure the middle screw. Secure the 2 remaining screws to clamp the dual stiffener onto the board. The service tray protects the board from flexing during removal and installation of components. Now the board is ready to remove DIMMs and flash storage. Refer to the service guide for details. With the DIMMs and flash storage set aside, remove the original logic board from the service tray. Install the replacement logic board in the service tray to transfer the DIMMs and flash storage to the new board. When all components have been transferred to the board, remove the stiffeners. Remove the replacement logic board from the service tray. Verify that the tamper indicator labels are intact on the heatsink. Carefully set the lower right edge of the logic board into the bottom of the housing to maneuver around the standoff. As you position the board into place, protect its components by avoiding contact with the chin and standoffs. Make sure the power button flex and audio flex cables clear the lower corners of the logic board and are not crimped underneath it. Loosely install the 2 top screws that are closest to the right corner of the logic board. Check that the screw opening at the lower right corner of the logic board near the audio jack aligns with the lower right housing standoff. Align the bus bar teeth with the ovals in the logic board. You may need to adjust the board slightly until the teeth align. Attach the Torx T8 security bit to the adjustable torque driver. Set the torque driver to 0.75 Newton meter and install the 4 new bus bar screws part way. Leave them partially tightened until the rest of the logic board screws are installed. Plug 2 unpowered cables or adapters into the ports to align them with the cutouts in the housing. Choosing ports that have some distance from each other offers the best alignment. Confirm that the bus bar teeth are still aligned. Use the pointed end of a black stick to adjust them if necessary. If you can't see the teeth through the oval openings in the logic board, remove the screws and try again. Verify that the screw opening near the audio jack still aligns with the lower right housing standoff. Fully install the 2 top screws near the right corner of the board. Install the 4 remaining black T8 logic board screws. Insert the wireless card support tool behind the wireless module at the upper right corner of the logic board. Connect the 4 wireless cables as shown. Align the metal clips over the screw holes in the logic board. Then install the metal bracket with 2 screws. Remove the wireless card support tool. Connect the rear microphone flex cable, the power supply signal cable, the power button cable, and the audio jack cable. Install the metal cowling and 2 screws over the audio jack, with a larger screw at the top. Confirm that the bus bar teeth are still aligned through the oval openings in the logic board. Use the torque driver set to 0.75 Newton meter to turn each bus bar screw until the driver clicks or applies the correct torque. Some screws may seat properly without an audible click. Do not over-tighten the bus bar screws. Follow the last steps below to complete this. Memory and flash storage are on the same side of the logic board. Follow the first steps below to begin at this point. The set of 2 flash storage cards are removed and replaced as a pair. You will start this procedure with the logic board removed and in the service tray. The 2 flash storage cards are located near the notch in the logic board. Notice the 00 or 01 mark at the corner of each card near the screw. Remove the T8 screw securing each flash storage card. Gently pull the 00 flash storage straight out of the connector. Don't tilt the card up as it can damage the connector. Repeat this step for the 01 card on the left. Only install replacement cards that have the same serial number. Check that the number shown before the 00 and 01 mark matches. Note the mark on the corner of each card and replace them in the appropriate slot. Starting with the 00 card on the right, insert the flash storage cards straight into their connectors. Visually confirm that the cards are fully seated with no gold pins showing and the screw holes aligned. Set an adjustable torque driver to 0.3 Newton meter. Install the T8 screws until the torque driver clicks. Refer to the last steps on this page to finish the flash storage replacement. Keep the logic board secured in the service tray when removing and installing memory cards, or DIMMs. The DIMMs are located beside the heatsink. Push both levers away from the slot to access each individual DIMM. Handle the DIMM by the left and right edges. Gently pull the DIMM out of the slot. Don't tilt the card as it can damage the slot. Refer to this image to check the slot number of the DIMM you are installing. Replacing DIMMs in slots 2 or 4, the inner slots, requires you to apply an absorber on the memory card. If you need to apply an absorber, refer to the inbox instructions that came with the replacement DIMM. To install the DIMMs, make sure the levers are open. Align the notch in the DIMM with the slot. Insert the DIMM at the same angle to the slot. Evenly press the DIMM into place until both levers latch. Visually confirm that all of the DIMMs are fully seated with both latches closed. Follow the last steps below to complete this repair. To begin at this point. Make sure that you have read and understand the safety precautions. The computer must be unplugged and fully discharged. Disconnect the power signal cable by pressing the clip and pulling the cable away from the power inlet. Remove the two identical T4 screws from the housing. Starting with the two bottom screws, remove the four identical T8 screws from the power supply board. Handle the power supply board by the edges to lift it out of the housing. Do not press on any components. Use a standard Torx T8 screwdriver to remove the bus bars before returning the power supply. To install a replacement power supply, first adhere the gasket to the square silver pad on the back of the power supply. Handle the replacement bus bar brackets carefully to avoid bending them. Attach the Torx T8 security bit to the adjustable torque driver. Using the adjustable torque driver, set it to 0.85 Newton-meter. The bus bars differ in shape. Carefully place them as shown on the replacement power supply board. When aligning the bus bar screws, notice that the screws can be installed with the bus bars raised or lowered. Make sure that the bus bar brackets are lowered and seat closer to the ESD safe mat as you install the screws. If the bus bars are installed higher, they are at risk of bending and will not seat properly when installing the power supply in the rear enclosure. Install the four T8 bus bar screws until the torque driver clicks. Align the corners of the power supply board with the screw openings. Use a standard T8 screwdriver to install the four T8 screws starting with the two top screws. Align the cable clips on the power supply cable with the two areas of the housing. Install the two T4 screws with integral washers. Connect the power signal cable. Follow the last steps below to complete the repair.